There is a gesture so small it lasts less than 4 seconds. A bend of the knee. A tilt of the head. A woman in ivory holding something together behind her eyes that the cameras will never quite catch, and yet every person watching will feel it land in their chest like a stone dropped into still water. You will read the word curtsy and think ceremony, protocol, performance. You will be wrong. What happened at the Commonwealth Day ceremony was not a woman performing deference to a king. It was a woman who had spent months learning whether her own body would obey her, choosing, in front of the world, to let it answer yes. Just once. Just enough. The king did not see the cost of it. The crowd did not see the cost of it. The cameras caught the grace and missed the arithmetic, the weeks of quiet calculation, the invisible negotiations between will and tissue and bone. I was there. Not close. Not important. Just close enough to see what the photographs would flatten into elegance. What I saw was not elegant. It was something better than that. It was earned. My name is irrelevant. My press credentials said accredited observer, which is a title so vague it has always made me feel like a rumor someone forgot to confirm. I cover royal ceremonies the way other people cover weather, noting patterns, recording atmospheres, rarely believing any of it touches me. I had covered 6 Commonwealth days before this one. I had never once cried at a Commonwealth Day. I want to be precise about what I noticed first, because precision matters when you're trying to describe something that resists description. It was not the gown, though the gown was extraordinary, cream and gold, structured at the shoulder in a way that communicated I dressed myself, and I chose this, and this is what choosing feels like. It was not the hair, pinned and perfect. It was not the composure, which everyone would later describe as radiant and serene, and a dozen other words that mean we didn't know what to do with how she looked, so we made it into a compliment. What I noticed first was how she walked to her position. There is a standard gait for state occasions, measured, unhurried, the body trained into a kind of deliberate nothing. I have watched it for years. It is a practiced absence of self. You stop being a person and become a symbol, and the transition is visible if you know where to look. A slight forward tilt of the chin. Eyes that focus past rather than on. The body moves, the person waits somewhere behind it. She did not do that. She walked to her position the way a person walks to the edge of a very high ledge they have decided, after a long internal argument, to step off of. Each step considered. Not hesitant, considered. There is a difference that matters. Hesitation is doubt. What she had was something that had come out the other side of doubt, which is not the same as certainty. It is more like, I know what this costs. I'm paying it anyway. I wrote that in my notebook and then looked up. She was already at her mark. The ceremony moved the way these ceremonies always move, in increments of formal choreography, each movement sequenced, each pause measured, the whole thing running on the deep institutional grammar of centuries of practiced tradition. I had my notebook. I had my position in the press enclosure, slightly elevated, slightly to the left of optimal. I could see the processional route clearly. I could see the moment coming the way you can see a wave from a distance, knowing the shape of it before it arrives, knowing you will be different after it breaks. King Charles entered to the expected response. Dignified. Warm in the particular way of people who have spent their lives in rooms where warmth is also a form of work. He moved through the space with the comfortable authority of someone who no longer needs to think about where his body is, it simply arrives where it's supposed to be. 76 years of knowing exactly where to stand will do that to a person. The Princess of Wales was already in place. I had interviewed a physical therapist once, years ago, on a different assignment, who told me something I never forgot: the most exhausting thing the human body can do is hold itself upright when it doesn't want to. Not running. Not lifting. Standing still. Fighting gravity in the specific way that recovery demands, not the dramatic fight of acute illness but the slow, sustained, metabolically expensive act of insisting on verticality when every system in you is negotiating against it. She had been doing that for approximately 40 minutes. I knew this because I had arrived early. I had watched the pre-ceremony positioning. I had watched the way she had settled into her standing posture and, then, made a small, almost imperceptible internal adjustment, a slight redistribution of weight, a breath held and released, and, then, became completely, devastatingly still. The way a person becomes still when stillness is a form of concentration. When the body is not resting but working, and the work is invisible, and that is entirely the point. Nobody in the room knew what that stillness cost. Or almost nobody. I noticed the woman standing 3 positions to my left because she made a sound. Not a word. Not quite a gasp. Something smaller, the kind of sound that escapes a person when they see something they recognize because they've lived inside it. She was older. Gray at the temples, a press credential from a wire service I didn't recognize, hands that held her notepad with a grip slightly too tight for a routine assignment. She was watching the Princess of Wales with the specific, careful attention of someone who has been where that woman is standing. Not metaphorically. Physically. I didn't ask her about it. Some recognitions are private. But I watched her watching, and what she saw seemed to be something the rest of us were missing, the way a musician hears a wrong note that the audience doesn't catch, the way a surgeon sees something in a scan that looks like nothing until you know what nothing actually looks like. She saw the work. I filed that away and kept watching. The ceremony continued. Scripture. Address. The weight of Commonwealth, 46 nations, 2 billion people, the vast and complicated machinery of a relationship that is always, in every room, simultaneously about history and about now. I have never been able to sit inside a Commonwealth ceremony without feeling the friction of it, the genuine grief and the genuine aspiration coexisting in the same ornate space, both of them real, neither of them simple. It is one of the few institutional gatherings that makes me feel the size of what humans carry when they choose to stay in a room together. She stood through all of it. 40 minutes becoming 50. 50 becoming the moment the program signaled the transition. She knew it was coming. I could see the knowing not in her face, which gave nothing, but in that same slight redistribution of weight, that same breath held and released. A body preparing to ask something of itself. A body answering, yes, but pay attention, because I am going to need something from you in return. I clicked my pen. Closed it. Clicked it again. The woman to my left went very still. King Charles moved toward the position. The room shifted in that collective, wordless way rooms shift when something is about to happen that everyone understands matters without being told why. The cameras repositioned. The silence got heavier. She turned. And, I thought, for the first time in 6 Commonwealth days, for the first time in 15 years of accredited observations, I am watching something I do not have the vocabulary for yet. The turn itself was nothing. A quarter rotation. The gown moved the way expensive fabric moves, with that particular authority of material that knows it's being watched. Her chin was level. Her eyes were on him, not past him. On him. I wrote in my notebook, she is fully here. And, then, I stopped writing. Because what came next was not something you could hold in words while it was happening. What came next was the curtsy. And, the curtsy, I was about to discover, was not a gesture at all. It was a sentence. A whole, complete, unambiguous sentence, written in the one language that has no alphabet, the body, choosing, on purpose, in front of everyone, to say I am still here. 4 seconds. I timed it afterward, watching the footage on my phone in the car back to the hotel, replaying it with the sound off because the commentary made me angry in a way I couldn't immediately explain. For seconds from the first bend of the knee to the full return to standing. The cameras captured the descent and the ascent and the composed, level gaze that held throughout, and the footage looked like what it was technically supposed to look like, a princess paying appropriate formal respect to a king at a state ceremony. The footage was correct. The footage was also, in the way that all technically correct things are sometimes fundamentally wrong, missing the entire story. Here is what I knew that the footage did not show. 7 months earlier, she had posted a video from a garden that made the whole world go quiet in a particular way. She had looked into a camera and said, in the calm and careful voice of someone who has rehearsed the sentence so many times it has worn smooth, the thing she needed to say. The video had 12 seconds of silence before she began. I remember watching those 12 seconds and understanding that the silence was not a technical error. It was her, standing at the edge of something, giving herself a final count. I had been in rooms with people delivering difficult news before. I know what it looks like when a person decides, not simply speaks, to say the true thing out loud. There is a specific quality of stillness that precedes it. A gathering. She had that quality in the garden video. She had it again today. The difference was, in the garden, she was standing still and speaking. Today, she was standing still and moving. And anyone who has spent time around people navigating serious physical recovery will tell you those are not the same degree of difficulty. Speaking is interior. Moving is negotiation between will and a body that has its own opinions, its own unpredictable responses, its own latency between instruction and execution. She had negotiated. The body had agreed. But agreements like that have terms, and the terms do not appear on camera. The woman to my left, the one I'd noticed earlier, the one who'd made the small, involuntary sound of recognition, exhaled when the curtsy completed. Not a sigh. Not relief exactly. More like the sound of someone setting down something they'd been carrying without realizing it. I turned to look at her. She was already looking back at me. "You saw it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I saw something," I said. "I don't know if I know what it was yet." She nodded like that was the correct answer. "It takes a while," she said, "to find the words for what a body costs." She turned back to her notepad. She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. That was its own kind of communication, the specific shorthand of people who have been in rooms where language arrived late and the body was already telling the whole story. I want to describe the moment of the curtsy with the precision it deserves, because I think precision here is a form of respect. She turned to face King Charles at the moment the ceremony's choreography required it. The geometry of the room placed them approximately 6 feet apart. The light in Westminster Abbey fell the way Abbey light always falls, through stone and glass, old and cold and gold all at once, the kind of light that makes even ordinary gestures look weighted with meaning. She was in ivory. He was in uniform and decoration. They were, in the specific visual grammar of monarchy, exactly what they were supposed to be. And then, she went down. The descent was, I keep reaching for the word and keep finding that there isn't a single one that does it, so I will use a cluster of approximations and trust you to find the center of them, composed, deliberate, and private. Not private in the sense of withheld. Private in the sense of belonging fully to itself. The movement had the quality of something that had been prepared for so thoroughly that it had become, in the preparing, genuine. You cannot fake that quality. Rehearsal eventually either hollows a gesture out or deepens it, and this had been deepened. The knee bent. The posture held. The gaze remained on the king throughout, not searching him for confirmation, not appealing for anything. Just present. Fully, unambiguously present. He received it the way people receive things they understand the full weight of. His expression shifted, not dramatically, not photographically, but in the micro-register that faces use when something arrives and they know what it is. Something behind the formal composure moved. Some recognition, some I want to say tenderness, and I think that is the right word, even though tenderness is not a word usually deployed in descriptions of monarchs at state ceremonies. Tenderness. The kind that belongs to people who have watched someone they care about go through something they could not fix, and who now, in a public room, are watching that person emerge from the other side of it and choose, deliberately, to stand in the light. 4 seconds. And then, she was upright again. I looked at the room. The room, 2,000 people, the press enclosure, the cameras, the officials with their programs and their positions and their long institutional training in maintaining appropriate composure, the room was doing something I have never seen a room do at a Commonwealth ceremony. It was holding its breath. Not the theatrical held breath of a performance at a climactic moment. The involuntary held breath of people who have just witnessed something they weren't prepared for, something that bypassed the part of the brain that evaluates and went straight to the part that feels. The cameras were still rolling. The ceremony was technically still in progress. Nobody in any official capacity moved or signaled or made a sound. And, then, someone began to applaud. Not the organized, protocol-appropriate applause of a ceremony. The ragged, slightly too soon applause of people who cannot help themselves, the applause that starts before it's supposed to because the feeling gets out ahead of the propriety. It spread. I have never heard Westminster Abbey sound like that. I wrote in my notebook, the room broke before she did. And, then, I looked at what I'd written and thought that wasn't quite right. She hadn't broken at all. She had been the still point while everything around her became wave. She had stood in the center of a room that was suddenly, helplessly moved, and she had remained exactly where she was, upright, composed, present as the applause rose and rose around her like water finding its level. The woman to my left was crying. Officially and, without drama, the way people cry when they're trying to keep working but can't quite manage it. I looked away to give her the privacy of it. I looked back at the Princess of Wales. She was still standing. She was always, in this story, going to still be standing. But, knowing the ending before it arrives doesn't make the arrival simple. It makes it something else. Something I was still, in the car afterward with my phone replaying the footage on silent, trying to find the right word for. The hotel bar was quiet by 9. I had filed my official report 3 hours earlier, accurate, appropriately formal, the kind of prose that reads as competent and communicates nothing. The Princess of Wales appeared in strong form at the Commonwealth Day ceremony, delivering what observers noted as a particularly affecting moment during the formal acknowledgement of the monarch. I read it back before I submitted it and thought, this is the shape of the truth with all the blood drained out of it. I filed it anyway. It was what was required. Then, I sat at the bar and tried to write the other version. The one that wasn't required. The one that kept arriving in fragments in my notebook all afternoon. The room held its breath, the body choosing what a body costs, partial sentences circling something I could feel at the center but couldn't quite get to. I had ordered a second drink before I understood what was stopping me. I am not a person who cries at ceremonies. I want to be clear about my own positioning here, because honesty about the observer is part of observing honestly. I am methodical. I am professionally skeptical. I have covered grief and triumph and pageantry for long enough that I have developed, as a survival mechanism, a certain productive emotional distance from the events I witness. Not coldness. Distance. The way a doctor develops it. The way a war correspondent develops it. You feel it, you record it, you move on, and the feeling and the recording do not interfere with each other. That distance had failed me today. Not spectacularly. Not visibly, no one in the press enclosure had seen anything, I was confident of that. But, internally, in the private architecture of my own processing, something had given way when the curtsy completed and the room erupted and the Princess of Wales stood in the center of the wave that broke around her and held perfectly, heartbreakingly still. I had felt it the way you feel a crack in something you didn't know was under pressure. And I had spent the rest of the afternoon circling it, trying to understand it, because I am the kind of person who needs to understand things before I can put them down. The woman from the press enclosure sat down 2 stools away from me. The wire service credential was gone. She looked smaller without it, or maybe just more like herself. She ordered something clear and looked at the bar top for a while before she looked at me. Long day, she said. Still trying to write it, I said. She turned her glass in a slow circle on the bar top. What are you trying to say? I told her. I told her about the official report with the blood drained out. I told her about the fragments in the notebook. I told her about the feeling of watching someone who had been comprehensively taken apart and had chosen, in a room of 2,000 people and dozens of cameras, to demonstrate that the assembly was complete. That the pieces had been found and the structure had been reconstructed and the reconstruction could, with cost, with negotiation, with that particular quality of stillness that is not rest but concentration, stand up in public and curtsy. She listened with her glass in both hands and did not interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, "You're looking for the word grace. But you keep thinking it means something easy." I looked at her. Grace isn't the absence of difficulty, she said. It's what difficulty looks like when someone has been through enough of it to stop fighting the shape of it. She paused. It's earned. That's the part everyone gets wrong when they use the word for beautiful things. They think grace means frictionless. It means the opposite. It means you've lived inside the friction long enough that you stop wasting energy on resisting it. You just move through it. With everything it costs. Visibly. She took a drink. That's what you saw today, she said. That's the word. I thought about that for a long time after she left. I thought about all the things I knew and didn't know about the year that had preceded this afternoon. The months of treatment, the gradual, careful returns to public life, the calibrated appearances each one, I understood now with a clarity I hadn't had this morning, a negotiation. Not a performance of normalcy. A genuine assessment, what is available to me today, and how do I spend it? Showing up at Westminster Abbey for a 2-hour ceremony in ivory and gold and standing at a mark for 50 minutes before executing a formal curtsy in front of cameras and 2,000 witnesses and the cumulative weight of every expectation that comes attached to that particular name, in that particular room, on that particular day. What is available to me today? I will spend it here. I went back to my room and opened my notebook and wrote for 2 hours without stopping. Not the official report. The other one. The one about what the body costs and what it means when a person pays the cost in public and does not look like they're paying it, not because they've hidden it, but because they've metabolized it so thoroughly that the payment and the movement have become the same thing. What I kept returning to was the 4 seconds. 4 seconds. And, inside those 4 seconds, the entire, private, irreducible story of a year that had happened in rooms no camera entered, hospital rooms, recovery rooms, the quiet domestic rooms where a person discovers, over and over, the exact dimensions of what they've lost and the exact, variable arithmetic of what remains. All of that, distilled. For seconds of a body doing what it had prepared to do, cost and movement indistinguishable, the audience seeing only the motion and the grace and not the enormous, ongoing, exhausting, human work of being a person who insists on standing up. I do not know what it cost her. I know it cost something. I know she paid it in front of us and let us think we were watching elegance. And maybe we were. Maybe that's what elegance actually is, not the absence of effort but the decision to make the effort invisible, to carry the weight and not hand it to the room, to walk to your mark and stand there and, when the moment comes, go down and come back up with your chin level and your eyes open and your whole self present, here, accounted for. Still here. I wrote that in my notebook, still here, and sat with it. Outside the hotel window, London was doing what London does at night, lit and complicated and indifferent and old. Somewhere in it, the ceremony had ended, the room had emptied, the Abbey had returned to itself. The cameras had moved on to the next story. My notebook was still open. I didn't close it. There was still something at the center I hadn't quite. I clicked my pen. Looked at the last line. Still here. I think that might be enough.